She was a nurse. He was her patient. Then, he became her nightmare. A hospice nurse took a dying patient into her home to care for him. 2 weeks later, she was found murdered in her own bedroom. The killer was still in the house. Cathy Mehaffey lived to help people. At 54 years old, she had dedicated her entire career to the most vulnerable among us, those in their final days, facing mortality with courage and fear intertwined. As a hospice nurse in Greeley, Colorado, she understood something many never grasp: that death is not always the enemy. Sometimes, compassion means easing someone's transition from this world to the next. For 2 decades, she had shown up, held hands, listened to final wishes, and brought dignity to people's darkest hours. This was her calling. This was who she was. But compassion can be weaponized. Trust can be shattered in a single moment of violence. And sometimes, the people we invite into our homes bring with them something we never anticipated. Something dark, something dangerous. In 2023, William Kuhl came into Cathy Mehaffey's life as her patient. He was 68 years old, terminally ill, and according to medical evaluations, had only months to live. He suffered from severe COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a progressive illness that slowly suffocates its victims from within. Each breath becomes a labor. Each day becomes harder than the last. Cathy knew what that meant. She had witnessed it countless times before. When Kuhl's medical situation deteriorated, his daughter made a difficult decision. He needed round-the-clock care, and a nursing facility couldn't provide the personalized attention required. So she asked Cathy if Kuhl could stay with her family. Could the hospice nurse who had shown such extraordinary compassion take him into her home? Could she monitor his medications, manage his symptoms, and ensure his final days were as comfortable as possible? Cathy said yes. This was the decision that would change everything. Kuhl moved into the Mehaffey home, and for the first 2 weeks, he appeared to settle into his new surroundings. Cathy's family adapted to having a terminally ill patient in their house. Her son was present. Her husband was present. There was a routine, a rhythm, the infrastructure of care. But beneath the surface, something was brewing, something sinister. William Kuhl was not the dying, passive patient everyone believed him to be. In private conversations with investigators later, he would reveal dark intentions that had nothing to do with his medical condition and everything to do with his character. He harbored resentments. He nursed grievances. And as his body failed him, his mind spiraled toward violence. On the morning of September 17th, Cathy Mehaffey's son found her. She lay in her bedroom, brutally murdered in a ferocious attack that spoke to rage, to desperation, to something twisted inside the man she had welcomed into her home with open arms. The violence was fierce. The injuries were extensive. Cathy Mehaffey, the woman who had spent her life easing human suffering, had suffered tremendously in her final moments. And William Kuhl was still in the house. When authorities arrived at the scene, the shock rippled through the Greeley community. This wasn't a case of burglary gone wrong or a crime of passion between strangers. This was a betrayal of the most fundamental kind, a violation of the sacred trust between caregiver and patient. But Kuhl had a plan. He had thought this through, or so he believed. He attempted to frame Cathy's son for the murder, suggesting to investigators that the young man was responsible, that perhaps family conflict had escalated to violence. It was a calculated move, a desperate attempt to redirect suspicion away from himself. However, the investigators were meticulous. They were thorough, and they understood something critical. Forensic evidence doesn't lie. Physical evidence doesn't have loyalties or biases. It simply tells the truth. The forensic analysis began in earnest. Detectives examined the scene methodically. cataloging every detail, every stain, every piece of physical evidence left behind. Blood spatter patterns were documented and analyzed by experts trained to read the language of violence written across walls and surfaces. DNA evidence was collected, trace evidence was preserved. Nothing was overlooked. As the investigation progressed, the evidence began to paint a devastating picture. The forensic findings didn't support Kuhl's narrative. They didn't align with his attempts to implicate Cathy's son. Instead, the physical evidence pointed directly to William Kuhl himself. But perhaps most damning were Kuhl's own statements. When confronted by investigators with the evidence, when faced with the physical reality of what the scene had revealed, William Kuhl began to confess. Not immediately, not with clarity or remorse, but slowly, incrementally, his story unraveled. He had killed Cathy Mehaffey, the man who had been brought into her home to receive care, the man whose every need she had met, whose comfort she had prioritized, whose final chapter she had agreed to help write, had attacked her with lethal force. He had murdered his caregiver. Authorities worked to understand the motive. Why would a terminally ill man, already facing imminent death, commit such a brutal act? The answer lay in interviews, in psychological evaluations, and in the fragments of Kuhl's own explanations. Resentment, anger, the feeling of loss of control. Perhaps the realization that he was dying fueled a desperate need to assert power, to dominate, to destroy. Whatever the psychological catalyst, the legal reality was straightforward. William Kuhl had murdered Cathy Mehaffey. He had done so in her own home, in the place where she should have been safest, where her family should have been protected. The case moved through the criminal justice system. Kuhl was charged with murder. The evidence was compelling. The forensic findings were irrefutable. His own statements had undermined any defense strategy. The prosecution built a methodical case, brick by brick, evidence by evidence. William Kuhl was convicted. Justice, in the formal sense, was served. A guilty verdict was rendered. But in another, more profound sense, no verdict, no sentence could ever balance the scales. Cathy Mehaffey was gone. Her family was shattered. The trust she had placed in her profession, in her capacity to help others, had been weaponized against her. The case of State versus William Kuhl stands as a dark reminder that sometimes evil doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a warning label. It arrives quietly, sometimes in the guise of a patient, sometimes in the form of someone we think we understand. Cathy Mehaffey spent her career understanding that every life has value, that even in dying, a person deserves dignity and care, that compassion is the highest calling. She lived that philosophy every single day. William Kuhl proved that compassion can be misinterpreted, exploited, and turned into a weapon. The forensic investigators, the detectives, the prosecutors, they brought truth to light. They refused to accept an easy narrative. They did the painstaking work of following evidence to its conclusion, even when that conclusion was horrifying. They honored Cathy by refusing to let her murder remain a mystery, by refusing to let her killer hide behind false accusations. In Greeley, Colorado, in September 2023, a hospice nurse who lived to care for others was murdered by the man she had brought into her home. But her story did not end in darkness. It ended in justice, in truth, in the careful and relentless pursuit of accountability. Cathy Mehaffey's legacy remains